Hey guys, it's Libby, and today I want to talk to you about a book that I read like 2 years ago because I'm still thinking about it, and how it came like within 2 or 3 drafts of being brilliant, but then just ultimately nosedived. It is, of course, A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. This book had several failure points, and a lot of reviews are up on YouTube of it. Most of them discuss how the problems with the execution of the book. So I'm not really going to talk about that. If you want to know more about that, I would recommend the reviews done by Francina Simone or Marina's from My Name is Marina's, and I will link those down below. I want to look more at the issues with the goals of this book, because even if the execution had been done well, the goals were still not quite there. I also want to mention that I have not read the second 2 books in this trilogy, nor do I intend to. Now, this is a retelling of Beauty and the Beast, the French fairy tale, which means I get to talk about some cultural theory. So, French fairy tales and sort of French culture in general is, in some ways, it's perceived this way by modern academics, and in some ways, it is actually how it worked, is created by the elite. So most French fairy tales that we know are from Charles Perrault, who was like some rich guy who wrote some stories. Beauty and the Beast is actually not by him. It is by a woman named Marie-Jeanne Le Prince de Beaumont. And if you have a name that long, you know you fancy. And this cultural tradition is distinct from the German cultural tradition, where culture, in all of the various ways that it exists, comes from the people. So the German fairy tales that we think of are from the Brothers Grimm, but they didn't write the fairy tales themselves. They went around amongst the peasantry and listened to these orally passed down stories, and then they wrote them down. So, when I first heard about this book, I got some interesting cues on what Maas was going to be doing with this story. The main character, who in the original French fairy tale is named Belle, which means beauty. In A Court of Thorns and Roses, the main character's name is This, which I assumed was pronounced fair, which is a slightly archaic way of saying beautiful. So I thought, and fair is a Germanic word. If you are familiar with the history of English, you know it's sort of mishmash of Germanic, French, and Latin. And so for the same concept, English has several different words, each from the different languages. So you've got fair in German, beautiful in French, attractive, I guess, from the Latin. Attractive might also be French, don't quote me on that. So I saw that this was the main character's name, and I thought this was going to be a fairy tale retelling more in the Germanic tradition, a Beauty and the Beast of the people, if you will, and I was like, tell me more. But this was the first of my hopes to be dashed, because this name is not pronounced fair, it is pronounced Feyre, which is a dumb name, and I'm probably going to have to say it several times in this video, and just know that I feel dumb every time I say it. It's also a terrible name! Like, to have the first syllable of this character's name be Fae, because this is a fantasy novel dealing with the Fae, F-A-E, and that was confusing. I'm sorry, I'm getting into execution. I'm focusing on goals. So let's move away from linguistics and talk a bit about the rich history of Beauty and the Beast retellings. Now, the original fairy tale of Beauty and the Beast looks kind of foreign to people who are familiar with the Disney version and the versions that came after the Disney version. So, you got 2 main characters, Beauty and the Beast, La Belle et la Bête, and in most adaptations, only one of them actually gets a character arc. Now, in the original French text by Jean-Marie Le Prince de Beaumont, it is Belle who has the arc. The Beast doesn't really have a backstory, he just appears to have been cursed to be a furry, beclawed person, by some evil magic that wasn't his fault. And so the intrigue of the story, the reason that we're watching the character arc, is Belle realizing that he is a good person on the inside, even if he is clawed and furry on the outside. And that, you know, it's not what you look on the outside, man, it's what you like on the inside. And so when she discovers this, the story is complete. And that's how it was for quite a long time until Disney happened. And, you know, I personally think that Disney improved upon the Beauty and the Beast story. Good job, Disney. A lot of the fairy tales they made worse, but not this one. So they changed the focus to the Beast, and he has this character arc, possibly reflecting our more enlightened times where people less automatically think that, like, ugly people are evil, which was a problem in the 18th century when Beauty and the Beast was first written. But so Belle is pretty much like a complete, fully realized character, and she doesn't really need anything. The character arc is the Beast's, and he sort of discovers that, like, people are good people. Even if he wasn't himself a good person, he realizes that such people do actually exist, and that love is possible. And when he realizes this, that is the completion of the story. And this is probably a more interesting narrative, so since Disney, Beauty and the Beast films have tended to follow this narrative a bit more, with the story arc being that of the Beast. The other modern innovation that you're sort of starting to get in Beauty and the Beast retellings is for the ugliness to only be metaphorical. So interestingly enough, we go from the original fairy tale where the beauty is only physical and not at all metaphorical, a metaphor for his ugly soul, to the Disney version where the physical ugliness is a result of the internal ugliness. So now we're just doing the internal ugliness, which, you know, sure. So we can either have a Beauty and the Beast retelling where Belle has an arc, or a Beauty and the Beast retelling where the Beast has an arc. Sarah J. Maas went for the interesting decision of giving neither of them an arc. So let me tell you what I thought was going to happen and how I thought this book was going to play out in this beautiful, beautiful story. So Feyre lives in a racist world. She is a human, and there are these Fae who live over there on the other side of the wall, and we don't like them because they're evil. We haven't met them. We don't want to meet them. They're bad people. Don't talk to them. And I will give Sarah J. Maas credit for not making our heroine the one super progressive person in her society. She kind of buys into all of this, and so when she has to go live in the magic fairy castle, she's like, this sucks. I hate these people. So what I thought this was all setting up was a gender-flipped Beauty and the Beast retelling, because what's the dude's name? Tamlin? We're not going to talk about the names. Tamlin does not really have any of the typical Beast attributes. Like, he turns into a wolf sometimes. That's pretty much it. Otherwise, he's fine. He's like a relatively nice guy, and he can be human most of the time. So it's like, well, he's clearly not the Beast. So what Sarah J. Maas is doing is she's made Feyre the Beast with, like, her ugly racism, and it's an internal ugliness. But this is the modern world. We can have, you know, character traits which are only expressed internally and not externally. Sorry, my camera started running out of battery, so I had to plug it in, but I didn't want to lose my flow, so I've just reoriented things to be closer to the plug. I'm now, like, leaning over the arm of a sofa now, so I feel like this is very intense. So then here I am waiting for this aspect of Feyre's own ugliness to be explored. And in the meantime, I'm having all of these thoughts about gender because French is a language with gender. All nouns are either masculine or feminine, and ones that are associated with people, you know, you pick the one that goes with the person. But other nouns still have genders. And bête, the French word for beast, is a feminine noun. So when you're reading Beauty and the Beast in French, which I have done, do not doubt my Beauty and the Beast credentials, it's kind of confusing sometimes because in some grammatical constructions, the beast is referred to with the masculine pronoun il, so he, but in most grammatical constructions, since the pronoun is referring back to the feminine noun la bête, the sentence has to use elle or she. So there's kind of some gender bendiness going on naturally in the original text. And if you need any excuse, you don't need an excuse, but if you feel like you need an excuse to go write your lesbian Beauty and the Beast story, this is it. Go do it. And I keep reading, and I keep sort of having to force this narrative into the text. And it just didn't work. And it's not that the building blocks weren't there, it's just that the glue wasn't there. All of the plot points to have this story be about Feyre's racial presidents... Did I say racial president? What a Freudian slip. Feyre's racial prejudice against the Fae... I forgot what I was talking about now. You just needed to, like, talk about it and make that the issue, the element of tension. When is Feyre gonna stop being racist? Because there's these brilliant bookends where at the beginning she kills a fairy when he is an animal and she doesn't recognize his humanity and she's just thinking of her own needs, which, I mean, she is starving to death, so that's okay. But, like, she literally kills him when he is an animal, and she sees him as an animal. And then at the end, she has to kill some other Fae, and they're humans, and it's really tough for her because now she's realized that we are all the same. I have a dream. And I'm like, that's your story! You had the story! Why didn't you write it? And also, because neither of these characters has an arc. Like, there's an external arc, there's the will they, won't they get together, but since neither of them has, like, an internal transformation, the last quarter is pointless. So once we get to the section under the mountain where there's all these, like, action trials and court intrigue and a super evil lady, a lot of people started liking the book better because they found it kind of dull before. I liked it worse. Before, I was like, okay, this is a mediocre fantasy romance. Those are allowed to exist. When we got to the end, there was just so much pointless suffering that our two main characters had to go through. Why were they suffering? Because normally, suffering, like, they didn't do anything. The suffering isn't doing anything to them. Because they don't have a character and internal issue that needs to be solved. Feyre and Tamlin are just two people who were trying to do the right thing and just made some honest mistakes, and it got them put into this really horrible situation. And then they just sort of have to last through it, and it's not interesting to read about. So those are my thoughts. Am I wrong? I kind of want to be wrong. I want Sarah to have, like, actually connected the dots in the racism narrative, and I just didn't see it. But let me know. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this. I'll see you next time.